everybody's time has value here. This notion that production, financial production, is the common association to who contributes is just so wrong, right? It is the time being equal.
Doug Boneparth, welcome to the Present Fathers podcast. It is so good to have you. I am so excited to chat with you. All right, fire starter question to start. The market's pretty rocky right now. What do you tell your clients when they want to sell everything? Sell, like Jim Cramer. What's your advice to keep us invested and not panic?
Yeah, I usually crack a joke to get them laughing and things not be so serious. I'm pretty good at the quick wits here, but from a real professional setting, look, if we're having that conversation, I think it might be a failure on my part, right? We are financial planners first. We write financial plans. We have regular meetings throughout the entire year. So we got to find out what's going on maybe at that moment in their lives. There's probably something happening that's unrelated to the market that might be pressing on their nerves. And we'll probably want to talk about that. Otherwise, we're defaulting to the planning that we've done to explain hey, you do realize this is the game we're playing, right? If there's going to be moments where there's extreme volatility, a lot of volatility. You guys forgot about the 20% drawdown back in April of this year. People are fretting over, AI being frothy and bringing the tech stocks down right now in these last few days. Just time-stamped your whole episode here. But nonetheless, that's the conversation we need to be having. What's causing these feelings, number one? And, can we go to the reference document hey, where's our North Star? Let's focus on this. And let's start talking about the things we can control in our financial lives, not the things that are well outside of our control. And that's usually what they're letting it get to them, right? It's the stuff that's outside of their control.
That tracks. Okay, so it's really not about the market. It's maybe they had something happen at work, or there was some sort of financial issue that hit them, and so that's really where the fear is coming from. That makes a lot of sense. So, Doug, tell us a little about yourself. You're married. You have a couple of kids. How did you meet your wife?
Yeah, Heather and I met long time ago as freshmen at the University of Florida. We had a little SEC banter before the camera started rolling here. It's all good. We're all friends. Some of us have championships, others don't. It's okay. It's cold. Be that as it may, one of the more unique things about me, from a professional standpoint, is that I got a very early start to be a financial advisor. So I grew up the son of a certified financial planner, ultimately became one myself, got a lot of time in. So from 19 till now 41, I've exclusively worked in personal finance, either operating, administering, or being the lead advisor and business developer of a financial advisory firm. And that's what we do, Bone Fide Wealth. We manage north of $120 million in assets. We work primarily with older millennials on down, all walks of life, but our cup of tea is the next generation investor and my peers. And you're right, on the personal side, Heather, you met her in college. She was this girl from New Jersey. I really buried the question there. Girl from New Jersey. I was from South Florida. Very unlike anything I was accustomed to as far as growing up in South Florida went. And my roommate from college actually became friends with her long before I did, because they were the two kids from the Philly area. There weren't a lot of kids from that area, so they grew accustomed to each other. And Dan, my really good friend and roommate, I was like, "Hey man, are you gonna date this girl or not? You got he was still dating his high school girlfriend." And he's like, "No, I'm still in a relationship." So, he stepped aside and, there we go. He was a real good man about it. And Heather asked Heather out. She's like, "No, I don't want a boyfriend. I like you and all, but the only child, the product of divorce." So a lot of guard put up, but the rest is history, right? We obviously have been together ever since. And it's been an amazing, as far as marriage goes, 12 years, but we've been together for over 20 years now. So I think someone else here has been with their high school sweetheart for a long time. I really like these relationships. We've been kids together and certainly adults.
I love it, definitely. And you get to be friends for a little bit, before you just jump right into the romance. It was the same with my wife. We were friends first. The relationship blossomed after that. So that's a great way to be. So as an elder millennial, gather around the fire, children. It'll tell you about a time before cell phones. We were kind of in that we were in that interesting sandwich generation where we had technology, but it wasn't everywhere, right? So how did you specialize in really reaching millennials? I know your social presence is a big part of your success. Talk to me a little bit about what's unique about your style and how you're able to reach fellow elder millennials like myself and Brandon.
Yeah, no, Dustin, it's really cool you said that because I think about that quite a bit. How I think what is unique, if not special, dare I say, about older millennials is we're the very last ever, to experience a world in both, an analog world and a digital world, right? We had a childhood that was pre-internet and I think was super awesome. Like you would run around the neighborhood with your toy guns and you could do that. You came home, when the sun went down and parents didn't really worry. It's crazy to think like we had that. And then, somewhere in our teenage years, out comes the internet and we're on the web and we're taking advantage of technology. It gives us a very wonderful appreciation of the world that, was, and an even greater appreciation for the world that is. So we're a really good bridge of these two separate, very different worlds, and I think that's really cool. Um, but listen, it's our lived experience. By the time I graduated from college and moved to New York City, we were pretty much heading into 2008. I moved to New York City October '08. I got off the airplane at JFK, and I think Bear collapsed that day. Yeah, like my random roommate I found on Craigslist working in finance was like, I lost 20 grand on Washington Mutual today, and I don't know if I'll have a job in a month. So, it's really shaky ground in which I think older millennials got to start their adult lives. Heather was in law school at this time, and we all kind of bit down on a social contract that was, do these things, get this degree, everything will take care of itself. There was no real accounting for kind of a black swan that was 2008 in terms of what it would do to the first few years of our adult lives and how it ravaged the labor force and what jobs were available. So a real rude awakening at the launch of our adult lives. A lot of things to get through. And look, no, not gonna say harder or anything compared to other generations. Talk to my dad; he'll tell you about being drafted to Vietnam, and what his, and civil rights and, very kind of tinderbox stuff here in the country. And, ours was the largest financial crisis, since the Great Depression. So, coming out of that and going through grad school myself, I had this epiphany. And what did I know? I knew wealth management. I'd been in the industry for a while. I was educating myself very well. Still kind of going along the lines of this. Go educate yourself. You'll be okay. But besides, Heather had already taken out $200,000 in student loan debt for law school. What's another 120? Like, let's go for broke. Let's just like really, really leverage ourselves with student loan debt. What could go wrong, And hers probably more of the cautionary tale, and mine a very calculated risk. Hers, albeit very calculated too, but that contract broke down with her. It didn't so much with me, but for a lot of our peers, it did. And I had this moment where I was like, look at this very rough start that we're having. I was surrounding myself with very hardworking, very smart individuals. I was willing to say if I can play this long game and bet on us, this will bear a lot of fruit in the future. And I thought there was a lot of need to help navigate the world of '08 and '09. And a big theme was navigating student loan debt and figuring out how to deal with the economic and financial realities that our generation was facing. And I just went for that one. And I put myself out there as that. At a time when nobody was doing it. It definitely got a lot of attention because I used a public relations background and a communications background to actually do a lot in the financial media. And I knew technology would always be, a superpower. So that was the internet side of things where I had, a lot of privilege growing up, always having a computer nearby. I had a grandfather on the internet trading stocks, believe it or not. Did you have a grandfather on the internet? That was pretty crazy, and a father who could use a computer and a brother who is really wicked with, using with programming and OSs. I just wanted to play the video games, but I learned a lot, going through all of that. And I put this all together and started to really just, again, put myself out there as an advisory firm that really catered to hardworking, high achieving millennials. And it's been almost a decade of doing that.
You made a lot of really good points, especially with like the transitions from like a world that doesn't exist anymore. Like our childhood was so extensively different than it is now, and there's so many. Each generation has its complexities and its challenges, sure, but I think we're heading into another shift. With the quantum and the generative AI and agentic AI. All these things are just completely shaking up everything, and they're shaking up education and the fintech world. Like one of the things that I have to really focus on in the fintech world is cybersecurity. And I can tell you right now, the bad guys are winning, and it's not even close. And it's so sad because like you have different malware now that is adaptive. It's real time adaptive. And so it's like, how are we even going to fight stuff like this? And when computing power goes through the roof and quantum computing in 5 to 10 years becomes something that's branded almost like a household object, it's like, and it's 13 million times faster than supercomputers now. It's like, I just don't even fathom what our world is going to be like. And, the CRISPR genetics, I mean, we can go down some rabbit holes there.
I'm happy to go down any one of them. Yeah, those are all fun conversations to have. But go on.
But yeah, so leveraging uh, and the predictions of this futuristic stuff is one of the tool sets I think is really important for people to kind of to think about in their analytics for their future and their retirement and stuff like that. So what are a couple of the top level tools that you think people need to really focus on? A good example for me would be the person you choose as your husband or your wife, your spouse, right? It's one of the most important decisions you'll ever make, and especially financially. So maybe you could give us a couple others that you could add on, or maybe add on to that one specifically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're so fortunate to be mature enough and have the thought that the decision you're about to make with the person you fell in love with is that permanent of a decision, that big of a decision, one that, I mean, geez, God bless the person who is thinking that way when they first fall in love. I met Heather at 19. I was not thinking the way I'm thinking here at 41. I wish I was. A lot of things would be different. Um, but yeah, and that's one, being very mindful of who you're selecting to, we wrote a whole book on love and money, and it ultimately puts before you the type of work you're going to be doing, which is already hard work to be on the same page with your partner financially, at least, let alone all the other areas of your life. But okay, you've already said that one. Lately, a lot of it's been physical health. Like if you're talking about and not just physical health, but mental health. I like to think about long games that you could play and have to play. Money is one of those games, right? Your health is definitely one. So what do we file under self-care? Anytime it's something like that, you need to have a practice around it, right? And start thinking about the things in your life that you can develop a practice around. And if you can develop good habits and get a good practice in place, ooh, that's where the growth is, right? That's where, and by the way, that works with investments too, right? You have a practice, a system around investing, keeping emotions away. The concept of quietly compounding is lost on so many smart people because they just don't create a practice around it. It has nothing to do with brain power. It has everything to do with consistency and discipline. So for me, over the last year, it's been physical health, making sure I'm treating my body right. For the last handful of years, it's been mental health. I always want to make sure there's a space in which I can get my feelings and thoughts squared away, so I can be a good dad, a good husband, a good advisor to my clients. I want to be these things for the people in my life, and I think most important, I want to be the best person I can be for myself. We're all really hard on ourselves. I feel like the smarter you are, the harder you are on yourself. You can really go inward. And if you're not careful, you can put yourself in some bad spots. And those bad spots will impact the people you love. And I don't want that. I don't want to feel bad myself. So find the areas that you can have a practice around that will create growth and opportunity for you. And those are all of them, at least. I'm sure I'm missing some really good ones, but those
Yeah,
are the
no,
ones that are most
those are
important.
great. Those are great examples because like even this morning I was thinking about like how am I being intentional? Like I take inventory, right? Like how am I being intentional with my time? And it's like, well, look at it like finances, like budgets, right? How am I budgeting my time? Where is it going? Am I able to track every minute, right? If I can do that, I can allocate more to the things that I want to do. Am I wasting it? Like, there's all these things, and that you can kind of broad stroke it across any section of your life. And I think it's really important that we take that time to be intentional, like you said, and just invest in ourselves, whether it's your mental, your physical, because it's like, what's the point of being wealthy in all avenues of life and then not having your physical health, right? It's clear you could have only one wish at that point. And so it's, I see so many people, they finally retire, they can make it, and they haven't spent any of their money, they haven't done anything worthwhile, and then they're too old to go and do the things that they dreamed of. And it's such a sad and tragic thing, and it's almost ironic to an extent. So, it's one of those things. There has to be a balance between YOLO and being conservative with your life. So I think there's a happy medium there. But Dustin, I know you could jump in and maybe give us a little perspective on that too.
Doug, one of the things I enjoyed the most about your book was the stories that you and Heather told. So you interviewed hundreds of couples, of individuals, and talked about money. And one of the themes that I noticed, and so I work in anesthesia, and so basically what we do is not that complex, but we can't make any mistakes. I can't give you the wrong medication. I have to make sure you're asleep. I have to wake you up. So I think investing, health, a lot of those things are the same way. You can make 10 great decisions and then make one terrible decision and you're wiped out. You can work out for a year and then hurt yourself and you're out of the game. So much of this is about making good decisions, but more about not making really bad decisions. So can you talk to me about a couple of the really kind of bad decisions that you saw some couples make and ways to avoid those kind of pitfalls to watch out for, to make sure you don't, really set yourself up for some big mistakes?
Yeah, I have a couple here. One is the hot potato chapter around religion. We went there. So in the first section of the book, we talk about beginnings and the things that create your money scripts, the things that long before you met your partner, shape the way that you think about money, our culture, our upbringing, who our parents are, our religion, right? These are all the trauma that we experienced in those formative years, all contribute to the way that we feel around money in our adult lives and ultimately what we bring into our relationship. Yeah, we interviewed hundreds and hundreds is very kind of you. Dozens and dozens is more like the case. But yeah, let's hype it up while we're there. Thousands of interviews over 15 years now. It was 2 years and dozens of interviews and all this kind of stuff. I think that on the topic of religion, we saw people, we talk about that two things can be true. Yes, faith is very important, but you also have to be responsible for your own actions and the decisions that you make. And we saw some people use religion as a shield, I would say, as the excuse to not take, action into, make their own decisions around these things. Like go bankrupt twice, and it was clearly the decisions they were making that had them there. But if faith was strong, it didn't matter, but it does, and you saw that be reflective in the current state of affairs of the family. So that was a very hot, I call it hot potato again. I give Heather a ton of credit for doing that chapter justice. We talked to all people from all faiths too, to try and figure out how money and religion come together. And also then power dynamics, the whole fourth section of the book. There's 5 sections of the book. The fourth section of the book around power is when, folks that were unable to have or call power by its name. It was power over one another instead of power, to something or power with, right? And how you take turns here. Like Heather and I are a very good example of this. She, for the very beginning, for 13 years, I would say, of our adult lives together, held down that safe corporate legal job that provided us with our benefits and stable income, while I went out there and took on these risks to build a financial advisory practice, which also came with a lot of like really cool stuff that I got to do as well. And you know, you have a couple kids and you go into a pandemic during that time. And, you know, she's working 3 jobs. She's being a full-time, you know, insurance attorney for a Fortune 100 company. She's been my co-pilot forever. So, you know, we've been together forever. There hasn't been a day I haven't been an advisor that she hasn't been by my side. So she's moonlighting, you know, as my chairman of the board and every decision, you know, in the practice. And she's being an amazing mom to our daughters on the cruise ship to nowhere when we're all kind of locked in our homes, you know, like this is enough. And she is not one, you know, she has ambitions too, right? She has dreams too. I'm out here living my dream. And, you know, overnight, it seemed like, even though it was more than overnight, you know, the bread earner wife holding it down with the stability all of a sudden is getting out earned, you know, 3 to 4 times what she's making. And she's looking at me having a blast online, you know, doing great. And she's like, yeah, no, like this is not going to work for us anymore. And I give her all the credit in the world for sitting me down and saying, hey, here's what's going on. You know, I feel resentment. And, you know, we have to discuss the power dynamic that's going on specifically in our careers and the way division of labor was being shared in the house. Like in the book, we talk about, you know, me, I think I was like making a meme on my phone laughing and I stepped over the folded laundry or the sock, you know, at the bottom of the steps. And my job's to bring it on. She's like, watching this happen, she's like, oh, hell no, you know, like, and truthfully, it's unfair. So, we talked to a lot of couples where I think the power dynamics were off and they really needed to get to a place where someone felt they had the space, right? And I think a lot of this book is helping you find the words, and maybe it's a sentence, a paragraph, maybe it's an entire section, maybe it's the whole book. But you will find yourself in it, and you will find words that you're looking for to be able to share them with your partner so you can have that convo. So you can just open the door. I'm not going to fix your marriage. We're going to share stories with you from people where you'll find yourself in the story and say, hey, read this. Hey, this is me. That's exactly how I feel right now. And I can use this as a way to engage in get to a practice. You'll just sit down one day and say, hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and we're going to do whatever. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. There's a lot we need to know about each other and a lot of perspective we should probably have in order to get to that. So those were some of the things we saw in the interviews, I guess, that were like, and there's some other icky stuff. There was maybe some folks that really just, you know, weren't creating that space for their partner to really feel comfortable. You know, why is only one person talking?
So, Doug, the timing of you sending me that book could not have been more perfect. My wife had a similar situation as you did with your wife, where she stepped back from her career. She went to Georgia Tech. She's definitely the smartest one in the family, but I was making more money. So we said, all right, we've got 2 kids. It doesn't make sense for us to be both working this crazy 60 hours a week. One of us has to step back. And when she did, there was resentment. There was that switch of her whole life, 20, 30 years of working, and everything was about that paycheck. And so this book has opened up some space for both of us to talk about her value, right? And how it's not just about who makes more money, but how you bring value to the relationship. So talk to me a little bit about how you had that conversation with Heather and where her value is, even though, yes, you're making more money, but why is what she is doing and why is her time just as valuable as yours, despite the fact that you make more money?
Oh, she would give you such a big hug right now. Like her favorite part of this book, her baby of this baby, if you will, is that third section about contribution. And what we want you to know are some really big key takeaways here is that everybody's time has value here. This notion that financial production is the common association to who contributes is just so wrong, right? It is the time being equal. And by the way, a big theme here too is that what is fair it's not equal. Equal is not fair. But back to what you were saying about just time, like caregivers are providers as well. And she says that over and over and over again. And yes, in our relationship, we had to do a hard examination of, not just the division of labor, but the, invisible load, that's put upon a lot of our partners, and in a lot of cases, our wives. They're holding down so much that we're sometimes just, checked out of that. Maybe, I can speak for our relationship. Maybe the one thing that Heather didn't need to worry about or want to deal with was our finances. You're talking about a couple that was very dialed in to everything going on in our financial lives. And it's so easy to get lost in your marriage and lost in the seasons of life through particularly raising children, right? Or taking care of parents or elderly, family members, that we lose the plot. And we often convince ourselves that we get it all figured out. Like, we had a kid, bought a house, like, oh, we got it. We know what we're doing. We got it all licked here. It's linear growth. Let's go. And it's like, that's a trap. It's never that. It's seasons and, the opportunity to play a game, the money game, just in a different environment. And there are going to be struggles, and there's going to be a lot of discomfort that comes from, going from one season to the next. So kind of bringing it back to, it was really Heather talking to me around this, like, hey, let's take a look. Let's reset the table. All right, let's take a look at how we're spending our time. And that's how I became Swim Dad, right? It was, what do we got to do here to get that space? How do we get Heather back into the conversation around money that we've lost that plot? What can I do to get that space there? And it was, again, what can I own beginning to end? And that was that Swim Dad comment. It was like, hey, all right, from the swim gear to the carpool to the practices to you're going to show up and cheer. That's it. That's all you need to do is come to the meet, find a nice spot, and start cheering for our daughter. I'm going to cover everything else having to do with it, right? And I think that's a really good example of how you create space to get people back into things that they're struggling to get to, or you want that, teamwork with. There's a lot to learn from there. So yeah, she would give you a huge hug, because again, the chapter on contribution is the biggest reframe in the entire book. If you want to have happiness and harmony in your relationship, start figuring out where those physical, mental loads are, and start figuring out what's going to serve the two of you well. It's not 50-50, right? It's not me. It's not for me to say 80-20. I can tell you relationships where it's all gravy. Like, I can truly tell you folks are like, this person's going to make money. This person's going to take care of everything else. And they're good with that. Not my cup of tea. That's probably an outlier, but hey, if it's 60-40, you got to find what works for you here, but you got to have the conversation and dive into, all right, how are we doing this?
Yeah, and it's so important to make sure that you're valuing that other person, especially with women, because they're multipliers. You give them a house, they make it a home. You give them love, they make children. Like, they make life. It's incredible. Like, and when you're synergistic with one another, you're unstoppable, because there's a certain thing that you're just naturally gifted at, and then your wife will be naturally gifted at another thing, and those things together make you unstoppable. And you talked about the fairness model a lot in the book, and Money Together. What is a couple examples of, like, maybe how that I know you and your wife use that very well, but like, how do you translate that to your two children? Like, how do you teach them the fairness model? Like, what's a good example of something that shows that kind of an action for those two?
Yeah, that's a really awesome question. I love when we get to the next layer of the onion. What are our actions doing to our children? It reminds me of I believe in therapy when you need it, in that space to, just be clear in your head. And I remember, saying to a friend, like, yeah, therapy is just a way to unpack all the things your parents did to you. And this was a friend that was older than me, and goes, yeah, you didn't go far enough, and the things you're doing to your children. And I was like, God, like, no. It's like, oh, so gutted right there. I was like, I didn't think that far. He's like, yeah, you don't have teenagers, you don't have college kids. That's why. I was like, God damn. So listen, what you can do is obviously the most obvious thing I could say is like be a good role model, like lead by example. But let's be specific here. When we say fair isn't equal, the kids need to see that if mom's going out with friends or dad has a couple busy nights in the city and got to have, dinner with a friend or did some fun along the way, that it's not a tit for tat kind of thing, that this relationship is not transactional. Right? I know a lot of relationships where it's like, oh, you went out with the girls on Thursday. I'm going out with the guys and I'll be back at 2. And that's what we're going to do. And it's like, you going to keep score in your whole relationship here? Like, that's not how this is going to optimally work. That's obviously a little bit of a red flag there. So we never show the girls that, like, mom and dad both work hard. Mom and dad both play hard. Like, hey, there's a babysitter tonight because, we need our time too. A happy mom and dad mean happy kids. It's not the other way around. So we take care of ourselves. You lead by example. And now that they're 9 and 6, I think the experience part is a great way to show them, hey, here's the things we're going to do as a family. And because we work hard and we spend our time, making sure we're good, we're gonna show that behavior doing some really fun stuff, whether that's spring break on an island or the family vacation to the theme park, whatever that is, or getting to go to summer camp and have your own adventure. That's the kind of stuff we want to do. So I think it's a lot of just showing the kids that we don't live in a transactional relationship. That we're a real solid team, and then we also have autonomy too.
That's awesome. Well, speaking about transactional, most dads kind of have this tendency to teach their kids about money with an allowance, and you teach them with a meme coin candy tax on Halloween. And since we just had Halloween, I would love for you to kind of tell everybody about this playful approach and how you make it actually stick with your children.
I think it's just the dad tax in general, right? I don't know if we have to really limit it to Halloween.
Sure.
We really talk about the dad tax, but yeah, with the Halloween, you're referring to a post I had, like, I'm going to teach my kids this Halloween about income tax by eating their candy. They know what's going to happen. It's also my birthday on Halloween, so it's a very interesting relationship with that holiday. But yeah, I'm going to eat their candy. Actually, Hazel's box of candy is right behind this door here, which is crazy because the kids know they can't just go into the box and start eating candy. Like, if I caught them doing that, they know there's consequences. They know not to eat candy. But literally for the last 3 weeks, there's just been this giant box, untouched, unfettered box of candy, and then I throw it out at some point. But let's talk about the dad tax. I think just in general, all kidding aside, and, us dads taking a massive bite out of their cheeseburger and getting them all upset that we did that, which is honestly hilarious. And I can always get them another cheeseburger. But definitely, ask them before you eat half of their dinner. You get the leftovers for sure. But I think just in teaching kids about money in general, my favorite question here is what's the earliest? It's never too soon to begin. All right, what's that really mean? That means some really basic connections. I remember when Hazel, was very young, and I was dropping Heather off at the train station to take train into the city to work her legal job, and Hazel asked, why does mom get on this train every morning? What? And I'm like, this is an opportunity to teach a lesson, a financial one. I've done financial lessons for both daughters' Girl Scout troops, by the way, both at 6 and 9. And let me tell you, 9 was better than 6. But back to this lesson of the train, I made the connection that, look, mom goes into the city. I said, you like to do fun things on the weekend, right? When mom and dad are around, we get to do a lot of fun times. Like, yeah. I'm like, look, mom goes into the city to work so we can do fun things on the weekend. And it's just keep it right there. That's it. You're like, what are you gonna tell the 3-year-old, the 4-year-old? Like, hey, let me tell you about time decay on these options. Let's break out Sharp Ratio on this train portfolio. No, you're not going to do any of that. You're going to probably even have a hard time explaining nickels, dimes, pennies, and quarters, right? But if you can make a connection between what's happening in their in their proximate life and what you're doing as a parent, you know? I think you're starting to teach those really important, lessons around money. People want to take it to the ones and zeros, and I don't think you're going to have much success there early on. You want to start making really good connections. Cool. Work equal earning equal freedom of time to do fun stuff. That's good. Hey, big win on if you got that figured out. You're laying some good groundwork for future conversations with your kid.
That makes sense, definitely. So, Brandon was telling me about your Girl Scout cookie empire. I was hearing some rumblings about that. Can you tell us a little bit about how that all went down?
Yeah, there's a newsletter I wrote. You guys really went deep here. You found the Lemon Up stand is what you're referring to, and that is one of my favorite pieces, and that goes back a handful of years now. That's at least 3 years old. I got to watch, Hazel, who is definitely a personality, my older daughter, and has a knack for she'd be a great saleswoman, and no question about it. She'll work a crowd. She's always angling, I'll tell you that much. And I got to watch her at the booth outside of our downtown in front of the Starbucks, which was conveniently next to an ATM machine. And I pulled her aside. I'm like, hey, what are you going to do when someone goes to that ATM machine to pull cash out of it? She's like, oh, that's it. We can ask them to use that money to buy these cookies. I'm like, yeah, I think she's just such a cute girl. I'm like, yeah, imagine it. I'm like, they'd be so blown away if you did that. They'll have no choice but to buy a cookie. And it worked every single time. It just worked every single time. And I think it was just one of those awesome moments where someone who loves sales, right, and just loves people. And it's such a cool setup, too. What do we sell? We're selling cookies from adorable girls. What a awesome, environment in which to, do this, because you're going to get a lot of sales anyways. So you get your confidence boosted. You're learning how to work with people. There's lessons around breaking, bills and quarters. I think those were the least important lessons to learn. Hey, we took in, and I appreciated, a lot of the troop leaders being like, hey, doing some math, real world math there. I was very much dialed into the human interaction and the ability to sell and the confidence game, because I think those things will serve your kid, far, probably much better than just, hey, I can, add a couple 20s together or break a bill here. We'll get there. Math class will handle that.
The only way I've ever been able to say no to Girl Scout cookies is I don't have any money. So if I was at an ATM and I just I'm buying 10 boxes of cookies every time. That's
dude. They got Venmo now and online orders now. There's virtually no excuse at this point. They'll just be like, yeah, scan this QR code, and all of a sudden you're in for $42 worth of Thin Mints. At least.
Yeah, worth every penny.
Everyone.
Exactly. So speaking of, the penny discontinued, right, as of last week. So our kids are not even going to know what a penny is. That's crazy. So for me, my son's 5. When I want to teach him how money works, I give him coins, I give him dollars. He doesn't understand Venmo, but he gets, if I give you $1, I get a piece of, candy, whatever it is. How do you concretely teach your daughters about money? Is it tactile for you? Is it, what's the way that's worked best for you to help them really understand it from a tactile standpoint?
That's a really awesome question. Real quick, my mother, a retired elementary school teacher and ESC coordinator, did a lot of learning disabilities as her background, and she'd do a lot of inclusion, either math or reading. And I'll never forget, she was telling me about the kids learning, currency and coinage, and a lot of them just like had absolutely no clue, what these coins were. Because we live in such a cashless society. There's definitely I know, you're like, no way. Yes, way, I've done this exercise with the Girl Scout troops. We're going in that direction to the point where we don't have a penny anymore. The trend's right in front of you. You're seeing what's happening here. I lost the question already here, but go for it. Tactile way. Got it. Got the question. Yeah. Look, there's still the ability to do chores and earn. There's still gifts, whether it be birthday or the holidays. Her grandma has the swear jar rule, meaning grandma accidentally lets a profanity go, and there's $1. We've sat down countless times. There's a money jar. I'm not gonna say where it's hidden, but Hazel knows the count. She and it's, by the way, in a big money roll with a rubber band, straight out of a rap video. No joke. But she knows the count. She knows what she has, And that's one way, of course, just with bills and seeing us transact. But I think you bring them into it. I think you got to get rid of the script that is like, hey, I'm signing a bill to pay for dinner. It what started out as, hey, Dad, can I sign the check? Like, she just wanted to sign on the line. Yeah, absolutely. Go knock it out. But you say, hey, help me leave the tip. Ooh, look at. Well, first of all, there are a lot of lessons in that right there. Why are we leaving the tip? What are we leaving the tip for? What's the tip on? The price of the food we just bought. Back to the lesson. We do fun things. Why? So we can have a nice dinner out. What about that person that we gave a tip? They were nice. They helped us. How are we, tipping? Are we being generous? You know, um, what funny name should you sign on the line? No, that's the lesson. That's just the fun part. But it's stuff like that to show them, yeah, there's the real like bills in your hands and the money jar, but there's also what money is doing for you, why we use it, and the reasons and importance behind it. And that could be as easy as, hey, come sign the check. Hey, Dad's signing the bill. Go to your mom. Like, what? Like, what's that? No, get out of here.
That's funny. Plus the dad tax. I mean, you're forgetting the dad tax again. The mini French fries or whatever bites of the cheeseburger. So let's fast forward to like 20 years from now, and Hazel and Ruby are grown. What's the single financial habit you hope that they'll thank you for, and what's one that they'll probably roast you for later down the road?
Yeah, I hope they roast me for being like too conservative. Like I'm pretty conservative. I am always cautious. I think I'm aggressive with the decisions I make to grow in business and stuff like that. And I don't mean like I mean like more on the marketing side and putting myself out there, not with like taking, a whole ton of cash. We're gonna go chase this thing and we're gonna buy a lot of staff and a lot of real estate for future growth. I'd be very cautious about making those investments until I really have to. So I hope they're like, Dad, you were just too conservative. Look, we found a way to be a little bit more moderate than you and have have better outcomes than even you had. And I think we're having some pretty good outcomes over here. So I'd be happy to see that. And maybe that. And as far as like things that I would teach them, I want to see them bet on themselves. Right. I think it's the entrepreneurial spirit, right? I could have said, I could have tossed that question away with spend, less than they make and be consistent savers and investors and compound returns. But right now, it's very important, but, too classic of an answer here. I want them to feel like they can bet on themselves and play long games with a high degree of confidence, because I think that's really where a lot of fulfillment and a lot of success can be found. And yeah, there's no doubt that the greatest return you can receive on any investment is the one you make in yourself. So whether that means they become entrepreneurs or they just, make really great decisions as a result of that confidence, that would be it.
Nice. So regardless of the direction they go, as long as they're betting on themselves, they're confident, they're having fun. That's really the key. I love that. I remember watching Dead Poet Society as a kid, right? And so Robin Williams is a teacher, and the father is a doctor, and his son wants to be an actor. And he tells the son, no son of mine is going to go into acting. You have to go into medicine. So the son ends up, killing himself at the end. And, there's this, oh, captain, my captain thing. Robin Williams, the teacher, gets in trouble because he encouraged him, all that kind of stuff. And it always stuck with me as a dad. It's so tempting to say, this is my child. They're going to follow in my footsteps, right? My father was a financial advisor. I was a financial advisor. My two daughters are both going to be part of Boneparth Wealth, and it's great to see that you're, you're not stuck in that mold of like, they're going to be just like me. That's huge. So what, if you could think, just like Brandon said, into the future, what would make you most proud of your daughters? Not necessarily from a career perspective, but what about them emotionally, mentally, spiritually? What would you see in them that would make you say, I am so happy that these are my daughters. It's amazing that they did this.
Heavy question, Dustin. Really, really, really throwing it on me here. I mean, I think if they're happy, I won. I think if one, they're happy, and two, they still want to talk to their old man and be with their mom and hang out with their family. If I'm being very candid, the thing I'll probably have a really hard time saying goodbye to them, when they go to college or whatever it is that they choose to do. But I think, them being happy. Look, Heather and I learned, from her going into law school and assessing, making a very calculated decision and not working out, and, us dealing with a lot of things that we didn't necessarily want to deal with in our adult lives, but we're very fortunate we worked hard enough to, get the debt refinanced from school, find ourselves building a family and a business. Like, we did it. Our hard work paid off despite some precarious, financial times and financial decisions that we made, particularly around education. I don't want them to, when you think about parents wanting a better life for their kids, we got a pretty good life and we're very blessed and fortunate for that. But if I think about how their lives would be easier, yeah, to avoid, feeling like the decisions, again, the question, like, for Dead Poet Society, there's that theme of conformity, right? The pressure of social norms and expectations. That's a big part of that movie, and you can see where it took one of the to the worst ending possible. So there you have it. How do we have them be again confident in themselves and pursue paths that fulfill them? I'll support them. Like, I yearn for the day where I see that spark. Like, I've gotten very good at seeing the sparkle in people's eyes and investing in my peers early on before we would make it. So, like, I'd kill for the day where I see, like, oh my God, that's lighting the fire in Ruby, and I will not say no daughter of mine will do X. Like, hey, I mean, obviously, in some limitations here, but if she says, "Dad, I want to become an artisanal, mustard, creator," I'd be like, "Hey, he didn't have, making artisanal mustard on my card, but you love that." And how do we, you want to build a business around that? You want to, do mustard consulting? You want to maybe do mustard investment banking? I don't know. Maybe we're growing mustard seeds. Beats me. I don't know why we ended up at mustard, but you see what I'm saying here.
Mustard
Like,
meme coin.
yeah, mustard coin. Nah, probably gonna poo-poo that one, unless we can find some real utility value for it, other than pairing it with hot dog coin.
As long as Colonel Mustard isn't doing it with the lead pipe in the study, we're all good. That's the real key.
Did
Yeah.
it? He did it in. He did it on a Coinbase account with a meme coin. Yeah, exactly.
So we've talked about crypto a lot. I didn't realize that you were mining Bitcoin very early on. Tell us. So
Yeah.
I think Heather wrote that chapter, and she briefly mentioned Doug had a friend. He got us into it. Can you dive into that a little bit more? How early were you to Bitcoin, and how did you learn about it, and what are your thoughts about it now?
This is one of the more fun stories for sure. We've been hodling. We've been holding for a very long time. Yeah, we have a chapter in the book about wishful thinking, and when you really want things to work out for you. And by the way, Bitcoin is not like wishful thinking. It's just an example. Certainly, crypto can be that example, not specifically Bitcoin. But I got a call. Here's the story. I got a call from a childhood best friend right when we got back from our honeymoon in 2000 and wow, I should know this, 13. And very smart, probably my smartest friend. So smart, it's tough to have a normal conversation. Just really, we're talking like, ever for someone in the medical, they like PhD neurobiology, just operating on a different wavelength than the rest of us. And I love the kid to death. He's older than me. I love the guy to death. And he starts going on about words I've never heard in my life before, from Bitcoin to blockchain to General's problem, white paper. And I'm just like, whoa. Like, what do you want? I just knew I knew when someone wants something. He's like, $3,000 each. We buy a miner and we mine this Bitcoin. And we learn a lot. And I was like, I didn't even pay the credit card bill to our honeymoon, which, we're broke. Like, we don't have any money. And I figured the best way to get, me out of this situation is to let Heather know, we're laden in student loan debt. Heather would easily just be like, no, hang up right now. So I'm like, Heather, I'm on the phone, with Seth, and he wants $3,000 for some crazy computer to get some internet space money. What do you think? And she's like, cut him the check. And I was like, what? Like, she had this true feeling of like nothing to lose here. She already bet on herself, and it didn't really pan out the way, she thought it would. So I wired him the money the next day, and we visited him in Austin, went to the place where they were putting together the Bitcoin miner. It was a very weird interaction. I'm like, why are we here? Shouldn't we just I just get the computer, dude. At one point, the contract that we had for our miner on eBay was selling for $10,000. And, me as an advisor, I'm just like, dude, sell the contract, at 4 grand profit right there. Then just go buy this Bitcoin. And he was straight up like, you're limited partner, I'm general partner. And I was like, who taught you these words? And he's like, I told you, I'm setting this thing up in my garage and we're mining Bitcoin, and that's enough of that. I'm like, that is financially stupid. And yeah, you're right though. You're GP. Have at it. And so we took the miner, mined Bitcoin. Wish it was enough to retire and be on a yacht somewhere. It's somewhere between $0 and $1 billion, but it's enough to actually be a meaningful piece of our financial lives. And not only the lessons I've learned in God knows how many 80+% drawdowns, and this is 2014. So we've been holding for more than a decade. The lessons I've gained from holding a sizable position are many. I'm pretty numb to volatility. We went from 128 all-time highs down to 91. We're in a moment right now where you're getting some pretty serious corrections and, drawdown on Bitcoin. Wake me up when, there's something really to look at, because I've done so many of it. And then that classic, I wish I bought Amazon or Apple in the 90s. Yeah, no, you would not be rich. You would have sold. You would have had it's 2 to 3 90+% drawdowns. If you're talking Apple and Amazon, you would have thrown up on yourself and sold every share you had probably. And you would have held for 30 years to survive that. So I'm proud to say, like, I've made it through. I've seen it at 300 a Bitcoin. I've seen it at 125,000 plus a Bitcoin. It is a crazy ride. It's helped us advise clients around digital assets. It helped us understand a lot about risk, really tap into where we think the technology is going if we're talking blockchain, and gave us some pretty objective takes on crypto in general. So thanks, Seth. Thanks, Heather. Again, that's why I keep these people around in my life. They help me make some really good decisions. But ultimately, it was a really good one, and it obviously makes for a really cool story. And yeah, we've held on ever since. Haven't sold a single sat, and still accumulate a little bit every month.
That's awesome, and I think that's going to be something that will be really beneficial for your children in the future. One of the things that I think about often is, like, my grandfather could barely scrape 2 pennies together when he first started out, and he had like 3 jobs, one of them being like a hail baler on the back of a truck in Idaho, that kind of thing. And he is the kind of classic person who wants his inheritance and his legacy to be passed on after he passes away. But like, I've kind of adopted this new outlook where I want to watch my children enjoy their inheritance. I think that would be a blessing to me. And I'm interested on your take on that, but also, like, what exact ages do you plan to kind of sit down with Hazel and Ruby and just kind of show them what the plan is, right? And why that age specifically?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I haven't really thought about what age. I have no qualms with revealing, I think even now we probably share with our kids more about make it very clear, like, don't go to school and start talking about your family's financial life, and in a classroom setting here, this is personal and private information, and they get that. I think we've been very forthcoming now. Obviously, at 9 and 6, this is not something they want to talk about. It's not something I would talk about with them. I don't want to talk about their parents' death and incapacitation. I think they need to have an adult brain, right? I think they need to understand how the world works and, what the realities of life are, before we get there. And I think they need to ultimately understand that they'll be in that position someday themselves. And this is a great way to educate and empower yourselves. So it's probably a long time from now. Where their adult brain comes into place is a little bit of a loaded question. I can show you some 41-year-olds who I don't think have an adult brain right now.
I know a couple.
Yeah, looking at you, Dustin. No, just kidding. He's putting people to sleep. It's troublesome. No, it's okay. We trust you. We trust you. You still got your license. For now. Anyways, so I think we really have to wait and see, how they develop and when they develop. I sincerely hope that it's not sooner than they have to, I think is ultimately where I'm at. But again, if we keep helping them understand and be good parents and turn them into good adults, then we shouldn't have too much trouble saying, hey, here's the most responsible thing that you can do in your financial life. This is often the biggest red flag. They know enough about what I do for a living. I tell them, like, this is where I see people really drag their feet and where the, saddest stories come from. And I don't want my life and your mother's life to be a sad story. I want to be able to share with them how insane it is to think that this notion of I don't want to burden my children by not bringing them into the fold is probably the number one way to burden the crap out of your children, because that is just, I think the worst thing you could do for your own dignity. I have very strong feelings around that. I grew up in South Florida in a very retiree focused, beginnings of my career, and just everyone's grandparents lived around me. I'm no stranger to the end of life process by any stretch of the imagination, both in practice and personally, and just the environment I grew up in. And that D word, that dignity word, we want to preserve that as much as possible. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know exactly what age that is, but I gave you the criteria for it.
Yeah, no, it's important because, and the reason I asked this is I'm always interested in other people's views, especially as like a financial advisor. I had a heart procedure in April, and I had to have a real conversation about a living will and living trust from my wife and my children,
Yeah.
with my wife and with my parents and grandparents and those kind of things. And like I had to think about like who would take care of them in the event that something happened, right? And I started thinking about that heavily. Like, how can I give foundational wisdom to them that will just kind of start the passing of the torch? I'm not trying to shove a torch on them, right? But it's
Yeah.
like in college, a good
He's
example
not trying
in
to light his kids
college,
on fire, guys. This is a good thing.
right? But like when my kids hit 18, one of the things I've told them already, and this is kind of the way I'm doing it foundationally first, is you're going to either go to college and get an education or you're going to start a business. And either way, I'm going to back you 100%. I'm going
Nice.
to help you. We're going to walk you through the process. I want you to go after whatever the dream it is that you have, but you're going to do one of those two things, right? And that's kind of me trying to pass along what I inherited. It's a different type of inheritance than the money wealth, but it's one of those things that plays into wealth and a lot of other things. And so it was just really important that I established that. And I loved your answer because it definitely is situational on your child, their maturity levels, and it also their age for sure. Dustin, I know you had a couple questions towards this as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, for our listeners who are curious, Brandon is the Grinch, so his heart grew 3 times in size, and that's worrisome. That's called cardiomegaly, and that's a big problem. So thankfully, able to shrink his heart back down to normal, and everything's okay. So, so Doug, if you can share with us one of your favorite moments with your daughters or just with one of your daughters, can you share a really heartwarming story that made you so proud and so happy to be a dad that you can think of?
Oh man. Well, I can tell you my favorite thing I get to do with them, which isn't a one-time event. It's a very frequent event, and I'm going to keep doing it as long as they'll let me do it, which is walk them to school every day. Ray, I don't care if it's snowing. Hazel doesn't care. Ruby's new to the walking to school game, as of, mostly this year, but they're all in the fold in terms of how good it is. It's so healthy. Not only do I get that bonding time with them in the morning, mom joins every now and then, but it's become very much a dad thing, talking about things we own in our daily lives. I'm the one that gets them to school. So walking with them is the conversations we have in that time where it's quiet. It could be a beautiful spring day, or a late summer day, or it could be just a very quiet Arctic chill walk. there, not only from a health perspective, get your mind fresh, get your blood pumping, nothing better than a walk. I mean, I love walking with Heather. That's one of our favorite activities to do. And having spent a decade in New York City, that's one of the things we love the most was scaling blocks after blocks after blocks. That was how we reset. That's how we had deep conversations. That's how we do a lot of our money dates today, is actually talk about not just how things are financially, but like what's working, what's not working. So that's a cop out answer or a very general answer because I'm trying to find like what a singular moment that made me like, I'm so proud, of these kids. I think for Hazel, it's seeing her when her back's against the wall. I call her the clutch kid because it might be a pain in the butt getting to that moment, but in the clutch, she delivers. And I'll forever be grateful that she comes through when you need her to come through, which is awesome to see. And Ruby is the epitome of innocence, turning 7 next March. The things that come out of her mouth just crack you up because they should not. I mean this in like, she'll say something smart or something that like, where'd you even learn that word? And how did you learn it in that context? And I think her appetite for learning is what makes me the most proud of her. I got to read, I got a kid that's like, I'm getting in a shower so I can get started reading early tonight. It's like, what? It's like, all right. Like we gotta nurture that one right there. We gotta keep this going. And it's not that Hazel, doesn't like her. She reads too, but like Ruby seeks out books, like we gotta double down on whatever's driving that, right? That thirst for knowledge. That's something to be proud of all the time.
Well, Douglas, I've got one last one for you, and then Dustin will wrap us. But you know, you've built a firm, you've written books, and you're raising Hazel and Ruby clearly with a lot of presence and intentionality. So, is there like maybe a question about money or fatherhood that still keeps you up at night?
Um, yeah. On fatherhood particularly, my own relationship with my father is not that great, for a host of reasons. I love my dad, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I have been given to build this life, and he taught me everything I know in those formative years of financial advisory, and well, I mean, what an opportunity to kind of get an early start in here, so a lot of love in my heart and respect for that. But yeah, I'll say it out loud. I want to make sure that they have a relationship with me later on, when they're grown up and they got kids. I'm spending time with their kids, and I have a very deep relationship, not just with the grandkids, which is an amazing thing. I had a wonderful relationship with my grandparents, but I also want to ensure that it's just as strong, if not stronger, with their parents too. So, I want to make sure that generational trauma ends with me. That's extremely, extremely important to me. And on the financial side, I think just keep pushing myself to make sure we're getting these lessons in and that they appreciate the time and the things that they get to do. I think, that's the key word, gratitude. I want them to always have gratitude. I want them to be grateful for all that our hard work and good fortune and position in life has gotten us. And if they can do that, they'll be good human beings.
That's great. Yeah, hits home. I didn't know my dad very well, and that's a tough one for me. So I think of a lot of the present intentional fatherhood that we do as breaking that generational trauma. And if my son and daughter don't have any interest in spending time with me when I'm an adult, I don't care how much money I have, how many friends I have, I would have felt like I failed. So that's a huge thing for me is I want to maintain those relationships. And what a win as a dad if you get to be friends with your kids, when they're adults. So I can't think of anything. Yeah.
That's all I want. I'm at a point where I want to see Heather take this book and take this material. I feel like I've already won. I truly, truly do. Like, I know what this is going to do for us over the next 7 to 10 years, no matter how successful it is in terms of copies sold, and I'm sure it will be wonderfully successful. But I feel like we've already won. But I want to see Heather, who spent 13 years helping me build this thing and have my time in the sun. It's her time. Like, I'm good, truly. Like, I really, really am. Like, I already see what's going to come out of this, and it's probably more work than I really want to do. Like, I need a vacation and a nap, but I'll happily work my butt off if it means making all of them happy. Like, I got it pretty good. I'm happy to kick it into high gear, even more, because it's fun, and I'm very lucky that I love doing all this. This has been truly a wonderful evening spent with the two of you. Really appreciate you having me here.
Thank you so much, Doug, and thank you for your vulnerability, your honesty. I think we dug into some really good stuff, no pun intended. So that was awesome. So I had to. I'm sorry. Yeah. So where can people find the book? What is the name of the book? Where's the best place for people to find you and Heather on social media? Tell us everything. Plug it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's all the plugs. We got, if you're interested in the book, head over to domoneytogether.com or just go to your favorite website to buy a book and pick up a copy. Heather narrated the Audible so you can listen to it as well. Someone told us they put it on their home speaker system, and they were just both listening to it as they were doing chores. I didn't really think about that. So that's a really cool idea. If you're interested in the firm, bonefidewealth.com, you learn about everything we do professionally and firm life. And do not forget that we actually write weekly on a joint money newsletter called The Joint Account, where you can, read all kinds of stuff to help you have a better relationship. I'll take credit for that name right there. It's pretty good. Bone Fide Wealth, that was Heather. And then if you want to find us, I'm at Doug Boneparth. Heather's at Average Joelle. Joelle's her middle name, in case you're wondering. Or, just use Google. All roads will lead where it needs to go.
I love it. Doug, this has been such a pleasure. And go buy the book. Go follow Doug and Heather. And dads, let's get climbing that mountain of fatherhood. We'll see you on the next episode.